Very good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for what is now the third in the series of 5 webinars we're running this week as part of ASB Awareness Week. We've had a really good week so far, and thank you all so much for all your engagement and support of the week. I've seen so many posts and things on social media, people hosting events all over the country, everybody using the hashtag making communities safer. And we've had such a big impression so far. So thank you very much, and please do keep it going. We've got a really good webinar for you lined up today. We have two incredible speakers, and we're really lucky to not only have two really knowledgeable people with us speaking to you today, but we've also got all of you. We have a real collection here of, we've got hundreds of ASB practitioners and officers who respond to antisocial behaviour as part of their jobs every single day. We've got lots of Neighbourhood Watch coordinators and volunteers, and we also have lots of members of the general public. So a really good mix and a really good opportunity to share experiences and share feedback. And hopefully we'll get some really good conversations going. So I'm going to post some questions in the chat shortly. There'll be 2 questions for practitioners and 2 questions for the general public. And please do respond and use the chat. But because of how many people we have on the call today, and just to try and help things run a bit smoothly, please do keep your answers very short. If we could actually restrict them to just one short sentence, that will really help us to make sure we get through as much as possible. So please do participate in the chat, but please do keep it short. Our 2 speakers today, first of all, we have Mr. John Hayward-Cripps. Sorry, John. He is the CEO of Neighbourhood Watch. John was formerly the director and interim CEO at Victim Support and has worked for lots of charities at very senior level for across England over the last 20 years. We also have Rebecca Bryant, OBE, who is the chief exec of Resolve. Formerly Manchester City Council's head of crime and disorder, Rebecca has dedicated her whole career to making communities safer. And I think over the last 30 years now at Resolve, we have done a pretty good job of that, but obviously lots more work to do. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca now. Thank you again for joining us, and look out for the questions in the chat. Hopefully look forward to having some really good conversations today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rebecca Bryant. I'm the Chief Executive of Resolve. Welcome to ASB Awareness Week. It's already been a whirlwind, and we are now at the halfway point, I think, for colleagues who are on the call. It's been fantastic to see so many activities happening in communities, so much information being shared, encouraging people to report, talking about, what is antisocial behaviour in different communities and how we can all support each other to make communities safer. So I just want to sort of do a bit of scene setting to talk about what is antisocial behaviour and what the problems are in our communities, and then talk a little bit about how we can report it and why it's so important, and then sort of have a bit of a conversation really about how do we respond, what can we do, and what are the issues around us tackling antisocial behaviour. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that we published our YouGov survey report on Monday, and that is available on our website, and I'm sure that Tom has been sharing that on social media. We have been undertaking our YouGov survey now for the last 4 years. We do it twice a year, and what that does is it ascertains the public's views on what is antisocial behaviour, what are the priorities, is it getting better, is it getting worse, what types of behaviour is being perpetrated in local communities up and down the country. And what that survey does is enable us to then have that conversation with government colleagues about what we should be focusing on nationally to try to make you feel safer. Okay, so last year there were 1 million incidents reported to the police, 1 million incidents of antisocial behaviour. Those do not include incidents that are reported to local authorities or housing providers. So let's double that number. So let's say we've got about 2 million incidents of antisocial behaviour. But our national survey says that over 57% of people do not report antisocial behaviour when they've been a victim or a witness to antisocial behaviour. So we're looking at 2 million incidents, then we want to say double that. Then we're looking at perhaps more of the significant issue and why it's such a serious issue in our communities. Sadly, for us who work in the sector, 60% of people say that it's getting worse in their community. And 40% of people are saying that they are not satisfied with the way that agencies are responding to their complaints of antisocial behaviour. So we've obviously got a bit of a storm here, the perfect storm. We've got lots of significant issues of antisocial behaviour happening in communities. We've got a lack of reporting of those incidents. And then when people do report, they're not entirely satisfied with our response. So one of the purposes of this call today is really to start to unpick some of that and to start to talk about really what is antisocial behaviour and how can we respond. So antisocial behaviour is a really broad definition or a broad term of different types of behaviour. It can often involve significant criminal activity, drug dealing, violence, harassment, intimidation. It equally can happen within communities, so where you live, but also it can happen in city centres and town centres. It can happen in public transport and public parks. So it affects every single one of us in our normal lives. Our survey says that you're more likely to suffer or experience antisocial behaviour, witness antisocial behaviour in city centres. Second is public parks and green spaces. Third is, sorry, I'll keep getting a bing because of all the chat already. And third is on public transport, and then fourth is actually where we live. So obviously, as I said, this is behaviour that is permeating across the whole of society. It doesn't matter if you own your own home, if you privately rent, if you are a social housing tenant. So it's a significant issue. But what we're seeing here is that people aren't reporting it. So I think, and that people aren't seeing the communication on how to report it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you can report it, where you can go to for information. If you feel under significant threat of violence or you are seeing a crime being perpetrated, you should be reporting it to the police. Your safety is paramount as members of the public. If the behaviour is less urgent that you are experiencing, you should be reporting it to your local authority or your housing provider. All of the agencies that I've just described all work together to tackle antisocial behaviour in communities, and there are many things that we can do to try to resolve the issue. We know that early intervention and prevention works. Over 75% of first interventions, so that could be restorative justice, it could be a warning, it could be someone describing to the person who's perpetrating the behaviour the impact that it's having on the community or on the victim, stops the antisocial behaviour from continuing. And that's our job. As ASB practitioners up and down the country, our job is to stop the antisocial behaviour. So we know that early intervention works. In some cases, though, it doesn't, and it doesn't stop the antisocial behaviour despite trying restorative justice and mediation. So what we can do is then start to consider taking legal action. One of the things that concerns me, and I think it concerns all practitioners, is that there's this number of 40% of people being dissatisfied in relation to how we respond. And some of that is about how we as practitioners communicate to our communities. You know, if our communities say that this is a problem in their neighbourhood, we need to be A, doing something about it, but B, telling the community what we're doing about it and working with them together to resolve the problem. Often, I think when I go around the country and speak to communities often say that they feel that as agencies, we don't listen and we do things to them rather than saying, what would you like us to do about the problem? So I think whilst there are many ways in which we can respond to antisocial behaviour, I think we have to be very clear with the public what we can do and what type of behaviour we can intervene in. And we need to be clear about what is crime and what is not crime. I am, as well as being the Chief Executive of Resolve, a trustee at Neighbourhood Watch. So I'm really glad that John is on the call today. And one of the things that I'm really proud of being a trustee of Neighbourhood Watch is that the engagement that we have with ordinary members of the public out there in the community, trying to support people to feel safer. And there's lots of information out there and support out there for for members of the public on how to report and what they can expect. So obviously I know that Tom has put some questions in the chat to ask practitioners first. You know, what is it that you do to tackle antisocial behaviour, and what are some of the barriers for you to respond, so that we can support people in the community to understand what our processes are and how we can better intervene. So I'm hoping that Tom will be able to help me, because there's so many different people on this call that it's quite difficult for me to see some of the comments, and so that we can get the conversation going.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just wondering if any of the practitioners who have put a response in would like to come off mute and actually speak to the audience. But I've got one here. Here we go, Roy. I'll come to you in a moment. One practitioner said, yeah, huge difficulty we face in our locality area is lack of staffing to be able to address the issues in a targeted approach, and they would like more prevention funding. I've got a few hands up here, so I'm going to come to, if it will allow me, Roy. Hopefully you are a practitioner with an opinion. I'm going to allow you a mic. Please feel free to bring yourself off mute, Roy, and share your views. And I'm also going to enable Jessica's mic for when Roy is finished, if you'd like to come in next. You'll still need to take yourself off mute, Roy, before we can hear you. Another one we've got here while they deal with the mute situation, and we've got someone from housing saying it's difficult managing expectations, and there's also some confusion around what is defined as ASB and what is just unwelcome or unwanted behaviour. There are things that practitioners simply can't address, like cats pooping in someone's garden or someone leaving their bin out. So asking people to take part in mediation can sometimes also be difficult, even though it's such a great tool in stopping the escalation of behaviours. People don't always want to engage. Roy, would you like to come off mute and contribute there?
I'm not sure that it's working for Roy. So perhaps we could ask Jessica to come off mute. And
can everyone hear me all right?
Yes,
we can. Wonderful. Hi, Jess.
Hi, so I work for a team called Links in North Devon. So we are the missing and exploitation team, predominantly working with young people. And one thing that we really noticed, I worked within youth justice before this role, is I don't know what it's like sort of like across the rest of sort of like the country, but we have very, very limited resources to be able to address particularly antisocial behaviour in our community. So my team, my department, we're a voluntary agency, so we have no statutory rights to be able to enforce certain elements. And the police in our area, we have youth intervention officers, so they focus purely on young people, and you know, whether it be ASB or other criminality, but certainly engagement. And I wrote about the prevention. It is the prevention funding in our area is just, well, it's been completely taken. I was on a project called Turnaround, which was to target prevention to try and prevent, ironically, young people from entering the justice system through an increase in ASB. And now that that funding's been removed, we're seeing this huge group of young people that are just sort of left almost like pondering in the middle. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important that we acknowledge as professionals and the public that antisocial behaviour it's not just young people. Certainly in our area as well, we see a lot of adults as well, and unfortunately I think young people get the rough end of the stick for it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jess. I mean, I think there's a few points I'd like to make there. Really, early intervention and prevention work. And we've got lots and lots of evidence of why they work. So whether that be mediation, restorative justice, youth intervention, positive mentoring, education. It also works within communities when communities come together through organisations like Neighbourhood Watch to inform the public on how to report so that we can intervene early. I think we'd all agree that services are under significant strain, whether that be through funding provision, whether that be through vacancies in jobs. I've just been having a previous big discussion about ASB earlier this morning, and we were talking about the recruitment crisis within ASB services. It is an absolute myth that young people are the main perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, and actually it is adults who are the main perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, and they're the ones who we take the most action against. But yet our survey suggests that young people hanging around is one of the major issues of antisocial behaviour. So there must be something there about how we collectively, so the public and practitioners, deal with that problem. That as soon as you mention antisocial behaviour, I've just seen in the chat actually, as soon as you mention antisocial behaviour in the media, there's either a picture of graffiti as someone's mentioned, or there's a picture of young people with their hoods up, when actually a lot of the antisocial behaviour that's being perpetrated is by adults. So I don't know if there's any more questions that you want to raise or people you want to bring into the conversation. Tom?
Yeah, just quickly, we've had a hand up from Jeff Lloyd. So Jeff, if you'd like to bring yourself off mute and chip in. And just while you're doing that, I'll also read out we've had quite a few comments from practitioners, all sort of saying the similar things. It can be really hard when they receive reports of things which kind of are antisocial, but it's more unwanted behaviours, and they don't always have the tools or powers to actually take any proper action against them. Hi, Jeff. I think we can hear you.
Hi there. I just want to ask really what the law says, because I'm a bit confused with it, because a number of where I am is very small community, and a number of people sort of parachuted in with checkered history, and they're all adults. They're not children at all, and their behaviour really, especially to some of the elderly. And on the one hand, the police say report every incident, and when you report it, they'll make a note of it. These guys carry on acting as they do, and then they say, "Oh, report it to the environmental health." You reported to the environmental health. They send them a nasty letter, which they completely ignore, and then it goes on for months and years. And and there's a couple of elderly people in our community really struggling with it. So you see a lot in the press about they want to tighten up on this antisocial behaviour, etc., but either the police seem powerless or they seem confused themselves on what their powers are. I mean, I just, to me, the people involved are quite, they've got a history of criminal activity. They've in and out of jail, etc., And I know it's all about rehabilitation, but their actions don't really demonstrate that very well. So what are the rules if somebody's continually having antisocial behaviours having a real negative effect on those in the community, and the police are aware of it? Why is there a reluctance to take any action? Is it because the prisons are full? Is it because it goes to court and they get a slap on the wrist and it's a waste of everybody's time? So what's a community? Are we supposed to police it ourselves? I mean, this is a small mining community. Not so many years ago, it would have been policed itself, but we've been told not to do that. So, because I can imagine if that did happen, then the police obviously would have all sorts of powers. So,
Jeff, may I ask if you've heard of the ASB case review?
Case review, no.
Rebecca, would you like to?
Yeah, okay, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I would always encourage people to report the antisocial behaviour that's going on in their area, whether you report that to the police, the local authority, or if you're a housing provider tenant. Unless we have the report, that we really seriously can't do anything about it if we don't know what the problem is. So that's the first point I would say.
Well, it's been reported multiple times to all the agencies, and it's still
okay. So what I would say in that instance, Jeff, there is something called the ASB case review, or it used to be known as the community trigger. I'm hopeful that some of you will have heard of that on the call. Although our survey suggests that we don't communicate enough about the community trigger or the ASB case review. What that's designed to do is to hold agencies to account. So if you have been reporting antisocial behaviour to the police or a housing provider or a local authority, and there are more than three or more incidents in the last 6 months, you can enact the ASB case review. And that means that the agencies in your area have to come together to look at the reports that you have made and to come up with a plan on how they should respond. And they should communicate that to you, Jeff, and then you can hold those agencies to account. It's a way of holding agencies to account to make sure they do something about the problem. So what we'll be able to do, because obviously we've got your contact details, we'll be able to send you information about the ASB case review. In fact, I think Tom may have just put that in the chat. So if you have a look at that, then that's something that you can use, Jeff. But as I say, I would really encourage people to report it. I understand that you may not have had the best of responses, but unless we know what the problem is, we can't, as I say, we can't resolve it for you.
And it is really helpful. Just keep reporting, because you never know, that might prevent further escalation. Or if something does happen further down the line, at least there's a paper trail of reports. It is important to keep reporting.
I've spoken to the local police and the community police and my local head of the council. I've spoken to the environmental agency, because one of the people affected is my mother-in-law was a widow in her 80s, and she lives next door to one of these characters. And it's honestly, it's probably about 12 different emails to different people, conversations over the phone. So I'm glad you've come up with this ASB case review. And if you do send me the details, I will definitely pursue it.
We certainly will, Jeff. And also, I've also sent some other links in the chat. And there's a charity called ASB Help, and they can provide support to people like your mother or anyone struggling as a victim of ASB. So I'll link that in the chat, and I'll send an email out after. But please do check them out if you need support with ASB. We're really keen to keep things moving at the moment, and we'll come back to we'll have more time for Q&A at the end. But if I can now just hand over to Mr. John Hayward-Cripps, the CEO of Neighbourhood Watch, who's going to talk about feelings of safety and how to make communities safer.
Thanks, Tom. That's great. And an afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Neighbourhood Watch and kind of the things that we can do within our communities, because I think we're all really aware of vast cuts to resources, and while lots of roles we would like to be done by the council or are sometimes not now, or the resources are just very stretched, and there are certainly things that we can do in our community that kind of support and can address antisocial behaviour. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. I mean, you'll all have, or the vast majority of you will have heard about Neighbourhood Watch, but I just want to kind of bring everyone up to speed. So we're very much a kind of household movement with over 2.3 million households across England and Wales as members and supporters, and something like 60,000 active volunteers across England and Wales. And we directly contact over 1.3 million people through our database and our newsletters and directly through kind of emails and things. And one of the things that I've been focused on in my role over the last sort of 5 years is to kind of alter the perception and membership of Neighbourhood Watch, which I think can often be seen as just sort of middle class, twitchy curtains. But I think now there's over 50% of our membership are under 54 years of age, so which might surprise some people, but it's a much more the age range is much wider, and certainly our website, which provides information on antisocial behaviour and various other crimes, we get over 1 million visits a year, and get something like 250,000 of those are from 16 to 24-year-olds, so a much kind of younger basis. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Neighbourhood Watch. I mean, as you'll be aware, our campaigns are all about crime prevention, but we also are focusing increasingly on antisocial behaviour and harassment. And part of the reason for that is that we had a survey in 2023 and in 2024, and we get well over 20,000 respondents. And of those respondents, antisocial behaviour or harassment is the most seen or experienced crime. I mean, whether or not all those elements are crimes, I think is a complex point, but is the most seen or experienced crime, but people still worry a great deal, probably more than about harassment, about burglary, even though burglary's gone down consistently over the last 30 years. But what we know and our members say is that lots of people want to report ASB, but either aren't sure who to report it to, how to report it, or are concerned potentially about reprisals if they do report it, or there being a lack of activity. But what we find as part of those own surveys, that what makes people feel safe, and what the kind of positive benefits that come with feeling safe are around when people are connected to their neighbours in the community. And that can be in a variety of ways. That's not always physical, that can be online, but where people have contact with local people. So that's neighbours, shopkeepers, the police. I mean, none of this is rocket science. If you imagine that you're walking, that you're out in your community and you say hello to a few people and you say hello to the local shopkeeper, that's how people feel connected to their community. And with that comes a feeling of safety. And when we feel safer, we tend to make better decisions. I'll come onto that in a second, but we make better decisions and we feel better about where we live, and we feel more resilient. And that's the kind of core of not just Neighbourhood Watch, but lots of community groups. It is something about being in a place where you feel safe and you feel a bit proud of, because you're happy with your environment, either the people that are there. And I think I was very taken with what Jeff was saying, that can be damaged quite easily, or that can be damaged, but the importance of that. And I think also from our survey, we're aware that where Neighbourhood Watch has a visible presence, so this is really simple stuff like signs and stickers, that people feel 40% safer in those areas, that someone is likely to help them if there was an issue, or that they feel more supported. And nothing's changed apart from there's a visible presence of Neighbourhood Watch. And the other thing I'd just like to mention, something that we're becoming increasingly aware of, is what's been called the double dividend of feeling safe. So this is some research from Northumbria University, that where people feel safer, that they make better decisions about their physical and mental health. Now, we can probably guess that your mental health might be improved where you feel safe. But I think what's more surprising is about us as people making better decisions about our physical health when we feel safe. So we make better decisions, and therefore our health, both mental and physical, improves. Now, I'm just going to go through a couple of the things that Neighbourhood Watch does specifically around antisocial behaviour, because it is, as we know, is a complex area. Although some of the solutions are really successful and quite simple. I mean, we have a lot of antisocial behaviour campaigns, and what we tend to focus on is what is and isn't ASB. I think, as Tom said, animals pooing in someone else's garden is not really ASB, although it might be really, really irritating. But what is and isn't ASB, the importance of reporting it. I mean, I think both Tom and Rebecca have emphasised this, and we would always emphasise this, about making sure that we report antisocial behaviour. If we don't, then the agencies that are pushed for resources will not be able to make an argument for increased resources or targeting those resources. So the importance of reporting is really important, and we don't always know which piece of information then triggers an intervention, sometimes from the statutory services. So we would always report it. And the third element that we focus on is around kind of who to report it to, because again, whether it's the local authority or the police, that can be slightly complicated. But that's the kind of core of our antisocial behaviour campaigns. We also have a community safety charter where not just individuals, but shops or organisations can sign up and get additional training around how to address harassment, antisocial behaviour. There's lots of areas of local shops where they've all joined, and they're all now kind of together to kind of address antisocial behaviour where they come across it, or harassment, which makes them feel better and their community better as well. So not just individuals working with Neighbourhood Watch, but organisations or shops and businesses as well. We really advocate the bystander training and provide free bystander training through the Susie Lampley Trust, so people can intervene and do that safely and securely when they come across kind of harassment in the street. Because I think our survey is really clear that lots of people want to report and respond, but often feel not sure whether either worried, scared, not sure how to respond. And I think bystander training within the community is a really good way of intervening safely. As obviously, I think, as Rebecca said right at the beginning, you know, your individual safety is really important. And also, one of our campaigns is really straightforward, is around that when we witness antisocial behaviour or harassment in public or on public transport, or we're aware of it, of asking the person who's the victim of it, literally, simply, are you okay? And there is really, when it's safe to do so, there's really good evidence that when that happens, people, members of the public and people in the community feel as though, oh, it's not something I'm just supposed to put up with. It's not something that's just the way of the world now, but feel supported and significantly feel better and are kind of more resilient as a basis. And that's something we can all do. That's something I can do, my daughter can do, my mum can do. That's not complicated. I mean, obviously, and I think this is some of the things that have been in the chat, there obviously can be complex, damaging and very serious and long-term elements of antisocial behaviours that need a professional kind of intervention. And that's things like the ASB case review and interventions from the police and the council. But as a community, I've just emphasised the Neighbourhood Watch interventions and what we can do as communities to make it less likely that ASB will take place and it's less likely to flourish. So it's those sort of things, and this is more the kind of general what we can all do as communities to make sure and take action in whatever way we can. And, you know, communities are powerful things when they're all pushing in the same direction, but doing those things that are safe, simple, and make it less likely that ASB will continue in an area. So I think that's the role of Neighbourhood Watch. I mean, we're very keen to ensure that we signpost to statutory organisations and charities when ASB is not something that it's necessarily a community response, where there are individual high harm, complex, long term, all those those elements of antisocial behaviour. But there are certainly lots of things that we as individuals in our community and communities as a whole can do to help prevent antisocial behaviour, because I think that's the kind of core part of an organisation that Neighbourhood Watch, like Neighbourhood Watch, can do. So I'm really happy to be involved in the questions, but thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks for all the great work that you do at Neighbourhood Watch. I'm going to come on to the Q&A very shortly. You will have seen that the chat function is now closed, but you can still use the Q&A function to ask your questions, and we're going to get to the Q&A in just a minute. But some of you will know we originally had ASB Awareness Week scheduled for the first week of July. Obviously, that never went ahead because of the general election, and we do now have a new government in power. So I'm just going to come to Rebecca, and maybe Rebecca will be able to just touch on some of the government's proposals and things that might impact on the work of the practitioners here and impact on the lives of the general public also with us here today.
Yes, so obviously I've just been trying to, as quickly as possible, have a little look at the chat and what some of the things that people are talking about. So I thought it best that I set out some of the proposals that the government are making. The first, there's quite a few comments about the police and resources, and we all know and recognise that because of austerity, neighbourhood policing particularly was really significantly impacted on, and that therefore meant that you were less likely to see your PCSO or your local police officer walking around in your neighbourhood. So the government have announced their neighbourhood policing guarantee. And they are now working towards recruiting 13,000 more police officers that will be dedicated to neighbourhood policing in your communities. And that also that you will have a named officer for you to be able to build a relationship with. I think that's something that we've all experienced, and we know that if there is a liveried police vehicle within a community, research suggests that there is then a 45-minute impact on reduction of crime and antisocial behaviour. And you know, slight joke, but we did talk about maybe getting Uber taxis liveried up so that they could drive around communities and therefore make them safer. We do know, I mean, John's just mentioned that, you know, more resilient communities are safer, and there is a big drive to engage more with communities, to get you to sign up to organisations like Neighbourhood Watch, to be more involved and more engaged in other activities that are in your community, because that makes you feel safer. And some of that neighbourhood policing offer, and these extra 13,000 police officers will be working with organisations locally like Neighbourhood Watch, like local authority, tenant residents associations, etc., and voluntary sectors, and organisations like the Rotary Club or the Wombles in your area if you go in Litterpick, to try to really build that community strength and resilience, to try to make them feel safer. Because one of the issues here is, what is the perception of how safe you feel versus the actual reality of what is happening in your community. So if, for example, there is a panorama programme tonight on knife crime, and then there is a survey tomorrow, people will say that they are more fearful of knife crime, but actually in their local community there may be very little knife crime. So there is this real conundrum for agencies on how they respond between what is the perception of the community versus what's actually being reported. The government have also announced the development and creation of the new Respect Order, and that order is being designed to deal with the most persistent of antisocial behaviour and higher harm, often being perpetrated in our city centres and town centres. And it's a tool that will be available to both the police, housing providers and local authorities to tackle some of that more serious antisocial behaviour. What's interesting about the Respect Order is if you breach the order, you can face up to 2 years in prison for breaching the order, and is arrestable by the police. The government also recognises that fly tipping, and that's something that's in our survey, and environmental crime is a significant issue in communities up and down the country. So they are now looking to develop and design removal orders, and that's something that DEFRA are currently working on, and that's going to be something that's going to be being rolled out. I think, I've spent quite a lot of time speaking to the government over the last couple of months, and I spent a lot of time with the Minister for Policing on Monday, and it's very, very clear that they are listening to what communities are saying up and down the country, that they're very, as one of their first missions, safer streets, they are keen to try to make and support communities to become safer, and they are making announcements often, daily. So yesterday, Yvette Cooper, who is the Home Secretary, announced £500 million worth of extra resources to the police. So I think whilst we recognise it's a significant issue in communities up and down the country, things are being done and things are being announced. And we're really interested to hear views on what communities want to see. So yes, more visible agencies, easy reporting mechanisms, and actually you seeing that we are doing what we say we're going to do, which is trying to reduce the antisocial behaviour in your communities.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that update. All right, it's time for the Q&A now. I'm sure there's lots of questions that you're dying to ask. So I'm going to start off with, please do post your questions in the Q&A function. You should see at the top of your screen there. We've had a few in already. There's one here from Mike. Mike, I'm going to read your question out. If you'd like to follow up, then I'll take you off mute as well, so you have the opportunity to do that. Mike says there appears to be no clear guidance on which agency we should contact. The responsibilities are split across numerous agencies who are quite happy to send someone in circles. Why can't we just have one agency responsible? I think this one's probably one for you, Rebecca.
Wouldn't that be fantastic if we could have one agency who dealt with all reports of antisocial behaviour? I think it is really, really difficult for members of the public because they're not quite sure who to report it to. I would say that you can report it to your local authority, you can report it to the police, and you can report it to a housing provider. We as agencies should take ownership of that complaint, and we should be the ones who are just deciding who is best placed to resolve the issue that's being reported. There's lots and lots of information available to you locally. If you were to go on your local police website, there will be a section on how to report antisocial behaviour. If you go on your local authority website, there will be a section on how to report antisocial behaviour. if you're a housing provider tenant, there will be information on their website about how to resolve antisocial behaviour. But as we've got colleagues from Neighbourhood Watch on the call, Neighbourhood Watch also have a website with lots of information about how to respond and who to report it to. I recognise that it must be frustrating for members of the public when they are trying to report antisocial behaviour, and it's one of the reasons why Resolve, along with colleagues in the sector, are asking for a national campaign for the government to promote how to report antisocial behaviour and then what can be done about the problem.
Mike, Mike's mic has been allowed. If you'd like to take yourself off mute and respond to that, please feel free to do so now. In the meantime, if it doesn't look like you can do that, we've got another question here from Karami. How do we convince people that reporting is safe, and is it safe? If it's not, how do we make it safe? We obviously know that 57% of victims and witnesses don't report ASB. So what can we do to make it safer, or is it safe? Move on for both of you, really.
Right, sorry.
To start, just to give you a chance. I mean, we would advocate always that to report ASB. In all cases, if people are concerned about reprisals, then where it's a crime, that can certainly be reported through Crime Stoppers, which is completely anonymous. We would encourage that. And I think the importance of reporting is something that we've already talked about, but there are ways of doing that anonymously. If people are concerned, also through their Neighbourhood Watch, we'll be able to have conversations with the police around that. And obviously, if people are worried about reprisals, then that's something that to talk particularly to whoever it is they're reporting it to as well, if that's something they're concerned about, because that then forms either a criminal act or further antisocial behaviour.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that, John. And I think there is a misconception that if you report it, you have to be identified to the person whom you are complaining about. And the answer to that is you don't need to be identified. And even in the case of taking a complaint through the court process, you can be an anonymous witness in that case. So unless the behaviour that you are complaining about can only specifically identified as you are the only person it's happened to, obviously then we would be saying we need to put some protections in place for you as the witness. But fundamentally, often what's happening in communities is happening to more than one person. And it's something that we collectively as agencies can deal with. You will probably see days of action that happen, and you might, particularly during this week, there'll be stands being set up in local communities and shopping centres where people can just go and have a chat with agencies, and that's your opportunity to go and tell people what the problem is in your community, and then we can respond to it more collectively where we flood an area with our resources rather than it being very specifically about your specific complaint about a specific address. So there are many different ways for you to report it. I would absolutely say report it to Crime Stoppers, which is totally anonymous. But you can make complaints and say that you do not want your information to be shared.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you very much. We've had a question from Annie Bailey, and I've also enabled your mic, Andy, if you'd like to chip in as well. He wants to know, of course, we need to deal with ASB and the symptoms of ASB, but what's been done to sort of deal with the root causes?
Right. Okay. So why do people act antisocially in the first place? It's really, really interesting, isn't it? Interesting. We recognise that mental health, drugs and alcohol misuse are significant vulnerabilities that are often there when we're tackling antisocial behaviour. And we know that early intervention and prevention work, and we know that there are many different types of interventions that are available to statutory agencies. So whether that be around a drug support worker or alcohol support organisations or anger management or positive mentoring or mental health services. But I think more needs to be done in this area, because whilst I can sit here and say very clearly, of course, we know that there are significant drivers to antisocial behaviour in communities. What we need to do is have a better joined up approach between agencies like the police, the local authorities, housing providers, with those support organisations to tailor make the support package that's needed for the individual who's perpetrating the antisocial behaviour. But because there is mental health issues or drugs or alcohol issues does not mean that we can't take action. We should be taking action on behalf of the community, and our role is to challenge that behaviour, to try to get it to stop, but also to be looking at how we can longer term change the behaviour of the individual and look at what some of those drivers are around the antisocial behaviour.
Brilliant. That kind of feeds on to the next question, actually. We know that ASB requires a multi-agency approach. Tobias Drew is a student who's doing a public services course, so he knows all about the police and all the different agencies, but is worried about how little other people know about them and all the different agencies involved with responding to antisocial behaviour. Tobias asked whether we think it will benefit the population if they were to learn about the agencies, and I wonder if Neighbourhood Watch have a role to play here, maybe, in sort of helping people to understand all the different agencies that are out there that people can reach out to. Oh, sorry, I'm on mute there.
Yeah, I certainly think there is, and I think that's part of the kind of what we would see as our role of being as part of connected communities. And I think that's, that what the different drivers are, what organisations there are. So so certainly people can be referred to what support there may be available, but also what interventions there may be available for people, both in kind of drugs and alcohol and in sort of social care where that's important. I think that's absolutely a role for Neighbourhood Watch, and we would see that as a key part of our kind of signposting, because I think often some of the perpetrators of ASB, to use that phrase, are also the service users of other charities, and it's important that they're not kind of seen in isolation, but there's as much connectedness between those. And we do find that where individuals are known within communities, it can actually again reduce the fear of antisocial behaviour, because people are the breadth of people within that community are recognised to be those community members. So that's a complicated way of saying, how we interact with everybody in our communities can have an impact on antisocial behaviour and how we feel about it.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that there's some very well established groups of agencies who are there to tackle crime and disorder, and they're called community safety partnerships, and they are all across the country. Recently there has been a review of community safety partnerships, and I think one of the things that all of you will say on the call is that they're quite invisible. We don't know who the agencies are, we don't know who the people who are involved in them are, and so that's one of the reasons why Resolve is calling for a national campaign. It's to identify who those community safety partnerships are, which agencies are involved, and what impact they are having in communities. Community safety partnerships have money. Your police and crime commissioners give money to community safety partnerships to respond to your priorities. So what you are reporting is happening in your community, whether that be antisocial behaviour, whether that be crime, whether it be environmental issues, whether it be issues in parks or drug dealing or all of those issues that make us feel less safe. And the community safety partnerships job is to come up with a strategy, but also a plan, and then fund activity. So that might be, for example, extra hotspot patrolling in a particular area where you're seeing a spike of antisocial behaviour, whether that be on a park, for example, or near some local shops. It might be to fund some youth interventions. So active, rather than just having a brick-built youth centre, but actually you've got youth officers who are going out engaging with young people in the community and offering alternative activities for them, rather than just going to the youth centre, because that might not be the best place for them. So there are very well established partnerships that are out there, and I think one of the things that's missing, and that we would definitely suggest that practitioners who are on this call take forward, and it's certainly something that we're saying to the government, is that we need to be much more transparent about what is out there and how the money that's allocated is therefore spent. Because lots of the comments on the chat have been around resources. There are still resources. Whilst we always want more, there are still resources out there in communities, and there is funding in local areas to provide interventions around antisocial behaviour and community safety issues.
Thank you. Question from Tim here, quite an interesting one. It's been mentioned by his local authority that there's the possibility of designing out ASB by changing the road or hard landscaping layouts. Not sure if this is something you've come across before, Rebecca or John, and if you know how this might work, and if it's something that might get further attention or funding going forward.
We've come across it a couple of times, particularly with organisations. I'm just trying to remember the name, who work with local authorities in terms of designing areas. This is around sort of lighting and routes, so that you can kind of design out an element of antisocial behaviour, because it's less likely to happen in certain areas. I mean, I think there is Secured by Design is one of the companies that are involved in that, and several organisations have produced white papers around enabling people to be able to access, but it's often around night time, so that there's increased lighting, but also how parks are designed and picked so there aren't kind of areas in parks where people feel worried or in danger. I mean, I think those things are really good. They're really good interventions. I mean, Safer Streets, the government's funding, I think version before the last one was particularly focused on kind of designing out crime. But we also know that not all antisocial behaviour is around the design of areas and environments, parks and sort of streets and something. That it can certainly help in certain of that, but I mean, no, it's a more holistic approach to that to reduce it, but there are organisations that do that, and I think often local councils now commission that as part of new housing developments that organise, that building companies have to try and design out crime as much as possible as part of that.
Did you have anything to add on that, Rebecca?
Well, yes, I did. I do. I think I absolutely agree with what John's saying. There is something there around, when new communities are built, to have better street lighting, to have less alleyways. There's a lot of work going on at the moment, because obviously we see hotspots of antisocial behaviour around high-rise flats and communal entrances, and antisocial behaviour happening within those sort of communal areas. So there's a lot of work going on about how you can make those more secure and a more harsh environment for criminal activity. So whether that be through CCTV, whether that be through street lighting, you'll see, I imagine in the city centre, when you go and sit on a bench, that there are little silver knobs on the benches, and that's to stop skateboarders from using our public realm as a skate park. So there are all sorts of different ways in which you can design out antisocial behaviour and crime. And John is right to highlight the Safer Streets, that a couple of years ago there was quite a lot of funding around that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We know at Resolve, and hopefully as a sector, that the majority of victims across the country, victims of ASB, aren't guaranteed specialist ASB support. In addition to ASB Help, which is a charity that can provide support to you if you are a victim of ASB, and I've seen a lot of individual sort of cases being posted in the chat, which we can't really comment on individually. Rebecca and John, is there anywhere else you would signpost people for support? Sorry, Rebecca first, and then John, you take yourself off mute for after.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that if you report it to the police, the housing provider, or the local authority, they themselves will provide you with support going forward on that complaint. Obviously there are other support organisations within local communities, so perhaps if you're an elderly person, you can get support from, say, for example, Age Concern. If you're a young person, you can often get support through your youth services around how and schools and teachers. I think one of the things that we're saying, though, as an organisation, is that it's very much a postcode lottery as to where you can and can't get support as a victim of antisocial behaviour, which is why we're calling on the government to ensure that if you report antisocial behaviour, that you do get paid for by the government support, like you would do now if you are a victim of crime. So if someone stole something from my shed now today. This is one of the things that Dame Vera Bird, when she was Victims Commissioner, used to talk about when that happened. She was automatically offered victim support because of that. But yeah, if you're a victim of antisocial behaviour, you aren't. So that's one of the reasons why we're asking for that. So over to you, John, if you wanted to just comment. So you're on mute, John.
Every time. So yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate. I mean, I think certainly the statutory providers, statutory authorities, so the police, local authority, and your housing providers, I think, as you've mentioned, and the patchwork of local charities that may be able to supply support as well. I mean, victim support will often provide support in most areas around antisocial behaviour, as they're commissioned to in some areas. But I think it would be to inquire what is local. I mean, obviously we know Resolve and ASB Help are national, but I mean, as you say, it's a bit of a patchwork. So there's a bit of a detective job, I think, sometimes around those support. Although again, the local authority or housing providers locally may well be able to say what charities are available in your locality.
And we will do a follow-up email as well with signposted links and hopefully helpful resources to help you cope. Really quick one final question, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to bring the webinar to a close. So one for you, John. Is there a youth neighbourhood watch?
There is. We have a youth council, and in some areas there are specific youth neighbourhood watches. I mean, you can be a member of Neighbourhood Watch at 16 plus. I mean, we're currently undertaking quite a significant piece of work with specific young people to develop some kind of alternative specific young people watches, and we know that will look a bit different to a traditional neighbourhood watch. So I mean, if people are interested, then and are young, I would certainly encourage you to get in contact with either us nationally or locally. There may be something already in place, or you could be involved in helping us design what a young person's neighbourhood watch offer could be, which would be really grateful to hear from you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I think that just about wraps things up. Thank you all so much for joining us today, for all of your questions. We will share hopefully a copy of the chat, all the questions and lots of helpful links in an email after. It's going to be quite a long email because the chat has really taken up, but we're really grateful for your engagement. We do have 2 other webinars this week. They are probably mainly aimed at practitioners working to resolve ASB as part of their job, but you're more than welcome to join. They're at 12 p.m. tomorrow and 12 p.m. on Friday. Please do continue making lots and lots of noise on social media using the hashtag making community safer on all your posts. Please keep making lots of noise. We want to be everywhere, and the more people we reach, the more impact we can have. Any final remarks from yourselves, John and Rebecca?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time. Today is Let's Talk ASB Day, and that's about us trying to have this conversation with as many people as possible. I recognise that sometimes you can be frustrated with your individual experience, but what we're hoping to do is to have some positive change in communities and to make them safer. And there are lots of resources out there for you to look at. And if you're not happy with the response that you're getting, please do consider using the ASB case review. Thank you.
I would just say thank you, and you know, we are fully supportive of Resolve's fantastic work in this area, and you know, really want to support communities. If we all do small things, we can make big things happen.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, John Hayward-Cripps and Rebecca Bryant.